Hey there, hi proselytizers.
Welcome to another flashlight.
This week we'll be discussing the rise of actual play and the era of peak D&D.
Let's roll initiative. So, in 2013, as we talked about at the end of our last flashlight, Wizards of the Coast released D&D 5th edition, 5e, like the modern canonical version of Dungeons & Dragons. And over the subsequent decade, or a little more than a decade now, I guess, D&D has become this hugely profitable brand, you know, with a ton of just like mainstream cultural recognition. Wizards of the Coast is turning hundreds of millions of dollars a year in profits. A D&D movie got a wide theatrical release with like actual movie stars in it and like mostly positive reviews.
It has one of the Wayans brothers, right?
The D&D movie? It has Letty from the Fast and Furious movies.
Oh, you're talking about the newest D&D
The
movie,
newest one,
not
yeah.
the Jeremy Irons one.
Oh gosh, no,
so I was like,
no.
positive reviews. I don't think that was...
No, it's got it's got the new Captain Kirk from the reboot,
Yes.
and it's got Letty from Fast and Furious.
It does, and it's also got what's his name? He plays Silver Linings Playbook and the Hangover.
I've never seen either of those.
Welcome to the Jake hasn't seen a movie Riley references corner.
I feel like that's about half our episodes. Anyway,
But we're in 2013.
So in the
'cause-
decade after 2013, right, as
Yes.
D&D's become a juggernaut.
Gotcha.
And its fifth
Okay.
edition has become a juggernaut.
Yes, and then a movie came out that was good with people we know.
Yeah. And that's kind of a sign of what a juggernaut it's become.
Exactly.
And this week we're going to talk about one big contributor to the growth of Dungeons & Dragons, which is actual play.
Actual play.
Actual play. In this episode, a disclaimer is necessary. We're going to be getting into an era that is less history and more, for a lot of us, it is present day, right? And most of our listeners probably have much stronger feelings about, you know, the conduct of Wizards of the Coast in the modern era than how Braunstein was being played in 1970, right? You know, you might notice that we're not talking about, any particular actual plays. We're not talking about the full history of everything that's happened with Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons & Dragons, tabletop gaming, streaming, the overall, like, eruption of the concept of nerd culture in the last decade, right? This is deliberate. We could make a whole flashlight season or, like, a whole separate podcast that just tracks what's going on in the modern era. In actual plays, in streaming, in the behavior of Wizards of the Coast. For this episode and for this, season of Flashlights, we think it's more interesting to go like deep on one thread than to go broad on everything. So that's maybe a disclaimer for why we're not talking about everything happening all at once in the modern era. Also, before we get into it, let's define what we mean, because I'm trying to be better about this. Let's define what we mean by actual play.
What's an actual play?
Yeah, so an actual play means you're actually watching people play, right? A TTRPG together. Sometimes this is live. Much more often it's an edited down video or podcast. This is a hobby with some slow parts, some rules checking, some dice counting, and so often it is a pretty edited down version of people playing together. The concept of an actual play, by the way, is pretty old. We'll link to an episode of a show called World's Largest Dungeon on a channel called RPG MP3. The episode we're going to link to was posted on September 24th, 2004.
That is 20 years ago.
That is fully 20 years ago, and it isn't even their first episode. Their first episode was in early 2003, but their earliest episodes aren't online anymore because they predate podcasts, and it was just the hosts posting MP3s directly to their website for people to click on, which didn't scale. A cool thing about RPG MP3 is that it is still active now. They have a Patreon and everything.
25 years on. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's 21 years now they've been going for.
21.
Yes.
I'm not good. That's why you're the dungeon master.
Being able to add up numbers that are around 20 is like my superpower. Yeah. But there's a lot of other podcasts like All Games Considered and Dragons Landing In and Have Games Will Travel and Sons of Kryos that all started in like 2005 or so that aren't active anymore. It's kind of cool that the oldest one is still active. One thing that these early actual plays have in common is that they are, and I mean this lovingly, extremely amateur. No one thought of this as their job, right? These are people who were doing other things full time. They generally didn't have any kind of training in comedy, radio hosting, anything of that nature. The audio quality is so rough that not even Riley could fix it. And Riley has fixed some crunchy audio on this show, let me tell you.
Oh my goodness.
And it almost feels like that's part of the appeal. Like it feels like really when you listen to them, you are on a Discord voice chat and people are playing a game in a disorganized manner. And you were right there in that chat with them, listening to them play.
That sounds very punk.
It kind of feels like it, yeah. And at the time, the hosts they had a real different approach to like why they thought people were listening. And we know this because Paul McLean, the host of RPG MP3, gave an interview in 2008 that we'll link to in the show notes. And he described a few different reasons that people might like listening to him play, he and his friends play, right? The first reason he named is like for people like lapsed players or people who don't have the chance to play right now. It's a way to maintain some interest and enthusiasm.
Oh.
Right? And another one that he suggested was to assess how new games play. And similarly, to give people who are curious about TTRPGs a chance to see what it's actually like.
Are they playing the same campaign or do they do small campaigns?
They've done a lot of campaigns.
Okay.
Yes. But yeah, this is in 2008. He's been running the show at the time for about 5 years. Yeah. And you're way down at the bottom of his list of reasons he thinks people play. He says, quote, part documentary of the players' lives and part radio play by people who may never anticipate playing RPGs, but who find the stories and banter engaging. So the idea of an actual play podcast is like just like lively entertainment and also like a parasocial view into the lives of your favorite content creators. That wasn't the priority yet.
Yeah.
Right? That like kind of the idea of a documentary of the players' lives, it came way down the list. And this real kind of amateur, almost punk feeling to these actual plays started to change with video streaming. Video streaming had some advantages over podcasting. It's a lot more engaging when you have a whole bunch of people talking at once, because you can see who's talking. You can convey a lot more information on the screen, and it also requires a much larger budget to pull it off effectively.
Oh, yes. TV and movies cost a lot of money to make.
There is a reason this is a podcast.
Right now.
For now. But yeah, an early example of like video streaming was Wizards of the Coast as a collaboration with the webcomic Penny Arcade. And the collaboration was called Acquisitions Incorporated. And they streamed it at PAX starting in 2010. By 2012, they had like an elaborate multi-camera setup. And then from there, I'm going to say the
McElroy's?
The professionalization of these games. Yeah, the McElroy started the Adventure Zone in 2014. Geek and Sundry launched Critical Role in 2015. And from there, the industry just kind of exploded.
I'm surprised that the Adventure Zone predates Critical Role.
The Adventure Zone does predate Critical Role. And it feels a little bit, especially at the beginning, a little bit less professional. If you listen to the first couple episodes...
I have several times.
It does feel a little bit more amateur and a little bit more DIY, even though a lot of them do have radio training and stage training.
They had just started playing as a group, D&D.
Yes.
So it's actually like people like their dad has never played before.
Yes.
So they're getting into playing D&D at the same time that we're listening to them do a show. So
Which is true of a lot of shows launching in that era.
Right.
If you listen to Not Another D&D podcast at the same time, one of the players clearly has never played D&D before and thinks that you're supposed to show up in session 1 as like a heroic figure. And everyone else who's like they're all improv comedians, but everyone else has played D&D before and they know that you're supposed to show up as kind of like a silly little guy. But yeah, it's worth emphasizing these new shows coming out in the mid 2010s were more professional, right? Penny Arcade guys were already hugely successful in their own right, huge online following. The McElroys, when they launched the Adventure Zone, already had one of like the top 10 comedy podcasts on iTunes.
Yes.
Right. Critical Role is all these famous voice actors like Laura Bailey and Matthew Mercer. And so like part of what happened as it became like, as we started to expect more polished streams and as these actual plays got more popular, entertainment professionals got involved, right? And they gave like polish and acting skills and they made it more popular to watch and also really changed the vibe.
Yeah. And we're trying to bring back that old punk DIY vibe to these flashlights. I feel like
that's true, honestly.
I relate to not playing a ton of D&D before starting a D&D podcast. You may have noticed when I ask lots of basic questions.
Like which one's the D12?
I mean, numbers, especially when they go up to 20, are hard.
It is a high number for numbers to go up to.
Shapes are hard as well.
If this is a YouTube channel, we could talk about shapes so much more effectively.
Oh, theater of the mind.
Imagine a dodecahedron in your mind. That's actually kind of hard. Like to imagine 5-sided faces folding upright is pretty difficult for me.
You're not supposed to imagine all the faces at the same time. Okay. If it's a 3-dimensional object.
I'm just looking at a D12 right now to cheat. Don't hide it. No.
Is it this one?
You know it's not.
Oh. Let's get back to
it. So what are we talking about? Right. Yeah. This entry of these entertainment professionals created a situation where they were making money off of their shows, and deservedly so. These are really fun shows. But it really created a norm where monetization or attempted monetization kind of became the norm in actual play, right? At the top tier, we'll link to some articles on the actual play industry that I found really interesting.
Also, make sure to link to our Patreon.
Speaking of monetization, sincerely, if you do enjoy the show, consider supporting us on Patreon.
Woohoo!
Anyway, in terms of the actual play industry, of which we are not a part, at the top tier, you have like Critical Role, Dimension 20. These shows with a big budget, a cast of entertainment professionals, a crew of dozens. And then below that top tier, there's like dozens of other shows that really are successful enough to generate revenue and feel professional. And then like below that, there's like hundreds of actual plays out there where the hosts barely make money or don't care about making money at all. And that's kind of the structure of the industry, right? Mm-hmm. And like, look, these new professionalized shows, these actual plays with a big budget are very fun to watch. While putting together the research notes for this episode, I had Fantasy High and then Star Trek to Odyssey from Dimension 20 on in the background. And like Dimension 20 is like, I don't know, a great example of this like modern professionalization of actual play, right? Where it's professional comedians, production values are very high, narratives are interesting, the story, the cast, they're like thoughtful about telling, let's say, diverse stories, even when the D&D source books aren't. And there's like hundreds of hours of previous gameplay on Dropout at this point. And like, this is great entertainment. I am not trying to knock the concept.
I mean, I love Dimension 20.
I mean, it is a lot of fun. Go subscribe to Dropout.
Absolutely. Game changer.
Game changer is very good. But in addition to like that entertainment value, media scholars have tried to identify some of the ways that like actual play fits in with the overall media landscape.
Okay.
And think about what about it appeals to us as media consumers and what makes it so successful. We'll link to an article that it's from 2019, and so it's from this kind of modern era and identifies actual play as having the following impacts. First off, enhancing the legitimacy of gaming as a hobby.
Oh my god, it's 2024. Are we still needing to enhance the legitimacy of gaming as a hobby? I'm pretty sure
they're arguing that's what makes a lot of these successful and appealing, is that you can, as someone who plays these games, point at like, well, these cool aspirational.
But there's TV shows of these games now.
Exactly.
These games are in other media. That makes them legitimate.
They're
interesting.
mainstream. Yeah,
mainstream.
The second one is kind of a revival of live improv as a form of performance, which might sound silly because we do have, through Dropout and avenues like that, a lot of improv available to us now. But really, the rise of these actual plays came in an era when there wasn't a lot of live improv that you could go access, right? Or a lot of taped improv that you could access as easily. There's basically Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Yeah, I guess there's like the Adam McKay, Will Ferrell sort of era of movies that are based on improv, but they are ultimately edited down into like, I don't know, narratives, but improv has narratives too.
Improv has narratives.
Step Brothers is extremely funny still.
I've not seen that one either.
Welcome to the corner where Riley references a movie that Jake has not seen.
We spent this whole episode in that corner.
We never left. All right.
Another like way that this article thinks of actual plays fitting into the media landscape is kind of obsolescing the game designer and centering on the GM or DM as the new like lead storyteller.
What does that mean? Obsolescing the game designer?
So if you think about prior to this era of actual plays, the people who were dominant in determining how tabletop games were played and interpreted were the game designers.
Yes.
In previous episodes, we have quoted a lot of game designers. But now when you think of the people who were dominant in that era, or in that area, in terms of saying, here's how one plays D&D, it's Matthew Mercer.
Right.
It's Abria Iyengar. It's Brennan Lee Mulligan. It's these people who are famous as dungeon masters.
Right.
And it's a very different way to think about like who's writing the norms of these games. Is now people who are doing it performatively for you to watch,
right,
as opposed to the people who are kind of writing a book, imagining that you'll be reading the book and reconstructing it at home.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah, and it kind of fits in with what some of that 2008 interview with the RPG MP3 founder, where he says, it might be that people want to see how games are played, right? Mm-hmm. And this is, by 2019, when this Media Scholars article came out, we really moved to a world where the way the games are played is being determined by the way that GMs want to see them played.
The way the players are playing them.
Exactly, because you can watch professionals play them, mm-hmm, and then try to recreate that as amateurs at home. And then a fourth impact of actual play that makes it a lot different from, I think, previous gaming is kind of reversing from like gaming as something we actively participate in to passive monetized consumption, where one thing that is appealing about actual plays is it gives you some of the same emotions as playing a game without having to do anything
without having to actually be engaged.
Yes.
Yummy. So you can write podcast scripts while also passively playing D&D.
Right, with your friends, the hosts of your favorite actual play show.
Oh, amazing.
And I look, so between enhancing the legitimacy of gaming, bringing back improv, centering the GM, this like playing TTRPGs via consumption, I think this is actually like a helpful list in terms of identifying like the itch that modern streaming scratches that previous gaming and these more amateur actual plays didn't.
You know what? Also, scheduling 5 people to get together and do a campaign, especially as an adult, is extremely hard.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sigh that hard. Yes, it is very difficult.
How many games are you running right now, Jake?
I'm only running one.
That's surprising.
But the scheduling logistics of it has become... I love my players. I'm so grateful to get to play with them. they all have very busy lives, and they are also very bad at filling out surveys. And sometimes it's like, one of my players hasn't filled out the survey, and I know what bar they'll probably be at for happy hour, and it's a 10-minute walk from my house, and I have the urge to just go down there and put the scheduling survey for the next session in front of them. Anyway, sorry.
That's just how it is sometimes.
That is how it is sometimes. Anyway, so yeah, when we talk about the success of these actual play streams, a ton of it has gone to D&D in particular. There are like Vampire the Masquerade streamers and stuff like that, but the actual plays that have really taken off as like big cultural juggernauts have been Dungeons and Dragons, generally 5th edition. A big part of that is like Critical Role, The Adventure Zone. A lot of these really early, really successful shows played D&D, which meant that anyone else aiming to be successful had like a template to follow. Play D&D 5th edition.
Yep.
I'm going to say that the 5e rule set is pretty well suited to like theatrical, like cinematic, epic fantasy, which works pretty well for a performative show. The rules are fiddly. There are like interpretations to be made, dice to be counted, but you can edit that out.
Right.
And, that makes it a lot more watchable. And it's worth noting that Wizards of the Coast has been an enthusiastic participant in kind of the centering of 5th edition D&D as the game everyone plays. We've already talked about how Penny Arcade partnered with Wizards of the Coast for its like PAX streams, and they've also partnered on the Acquisitions Incorporated sourcebook, which you can like from that campaign. They have a sourcebook about Acquisitions Incorporated.
Oh, that's fun.
I love that sourcebook. I actually ended up running a campaign in a post-revolutionary fantasy world called the People's Bureau of Acquisitions.
Oh.
That was like, it pulled really heavily from Acquisitions Incorporated, but in a world that was, the revolution happened and the proletariat won. Critical Role also partners with Wizards of the Coast, and they've released a lot of source books in their settings. And like Wizards of the Coast sees this as a huge part of why D&D has become so popular. I'm going to quote the vice president of the Dungeons and Dragons franchise, hell of a title, Nathan Stewart. And he says, "For the first time in our research, it used to be that friends and family were the number one reason someone joined D&D. Now, the number one reason is I saw someone playing online and I joined." And like, it's really hard to overstate like what this like era of peak D&D has meant for Wizards of the Coast and their corporate overlords Hasbro in terms of overall bottom line, right? In 2020, Hasbro reported, and we'll link to this in the show notes, that Wizards of the Coast generated $420 million in profit with a 46% profit margin.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, no, like a 46% profit margin. I was trying to think of any other business that has like numbers like that. And it's really a combination of like monopoly pricing power and a product that is like largely distributed online. So there's like no cost per unit sold.
Yeah, they're selling like mechanics and ideas and stories.
Yeah, play tested ones.
Play tested ones, but
expertly designed ones.
Yeah. But they're not physical products. And like they're just, and when they are books, and do they sell dye? I'm sure they sell dye and like little ephemera like that. Dice are extremely important, but I don't know, little figurines or something.
Exactly. But like the source books are being sold online and the profit margins are huge.
Yeah.
We'll link to Hasbro's quarterly SEC filing for May 2024. We're going to link to some SEC filings in this podcast.
Oh my God.
Finally.
Yes. Seriously. Give me business documents.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Wizards, one of their divisions is called Wizards of the Coast and Digital Gaming.
Ooh.
You can kind of think of that as D&D, Magic the Gathering, and licensing for stuff like Baldur's Gate.
Gotcha.
As of May 2024, Wizards of the Coast and Digital Gaming is more than 100% of the operating profit of Hasbro.
How can it be more than 100%?
Other divisions are losing money.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So Wizards of the Coast is like a huge business, and like the mainstreaming of this hobby via actual play into like this, everyone plays D&D. Everyone plays D&D because everyone else plays D&D. Like actual play has really created that that central position for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. It's been great for Wizards of the Coast. Mm-hmm. And like, it's really affected the kind of stories that Wizards releases, right? They have that Penny Arcade book, Acquisitions Incorporated. They have a whole lot of partnerships with Critical Role, like Explorer's Guide to Wildemount, Call of the Netherdeep. They have partnerships we haven't even discussed yet with other actual plays, like their book Flea Mortals with MCDM, or the Dungeon Dudes partnership book, Dungeons of Drakkenheim. This streaming boom has really been symbiotic with Wizards of the Coast. Yeah. And, you know, because Wizards of the Coast is such a huge business, there's also movement of scarce top-tier talent between the company and these actual plays. Orion Black quit working with Wizards of the Coast over a racist work environment. Mm-hmm. Hey, I just want to emphasize, we are not valorizing Wizards of the Coast when we say that it's been financially successful. We're just saying it's been financially successful. And when we say it's like the center of gaming culture, we're not saying, and that is a great thing. We're just saying it is the center of gaming culture.
It's the biggest player in town.
Yeah. Yeah. So after Orion Black quit working with Wizards of the Coast, Dimension 20 hired them, and they're now the creative director at Dimension 20. And so because there's this kind of competition for that scarce top level talent. Yeah. There's really, people can flow back and forth between Wizards of the Coast and these actual plays. And you know, I will say that maybe over the last year or two, that dynamic, this close symbiosis, has started to shift. And like, a big part of that has been Wizards of the Coast's attempt to change the landscape of intellectual property around D&D in ways that are not great for these content creators.
I was about ready to ask, like, we don't need a licensing. We don't need to pay money to talk about D&D or play D&D.
To talk about D&D, no. To play D&D, not for now. We'll talk about that more next week.
I'm holding my breath.
Excellent. Well, don't hold your breath too long, because we were just talking about partnerships. So I'm going to describe some creatures these are creatures either that have been in the game since the old school D&D days, or they're brand new additions from this partnered content. I'm going to have you try to guess which one is which. And these are all like D&D Beyond, officially Wizards of the Coast embraced things. The first one is the Gelatinous Cube. And I'll read the description.
Sounds yummy.
Right? Well, just you wait. Gelatinous cubes scour dungeon passages in silent, predictable patterns, leaving perfectly clean paths in their wake. They consume living tissue while leaving bones and other materials undissolved. A gelatinous cube is all but transparent, making it hard to spot until it attacks. A cube that is well fed can be easier to spot, since its victim's bones, coins, and other objects can be seen suspended inside the creature. Is that old school D&D, or is that a modern streaming actual play partnership?
I was gonna say, those sound kind of like really cool vacuum cleaners.
Vacuum cleaners that eat people?
That eat people, yeah. And are kind of yummy sounding. But maybe in like the Tide Pod kind of way. I think I know the answer to this because I saw the D&D movie.
Yes. Yeah,
so that is a WotC creation, right?
It is a TSR. Yes, it is old school.
Old
pre-WotC TSR. Yeah. That actually first appeared in like the box set. In like 1974.
Dang, super old school.
Super old school. I'm going to read you another one. Tell me again if this is, old school D&D or a modern partnership. Craghammer Goat Knight. The sheer cliff faces and winding mountainside roads of the Cliffkeep Mountains are nearly impossible to traverse by normal means at any speed. The peak climber knights of Craghammer, commonly known as the Goat Knights, are the enforcers of peace and justice across the mountain range. They trust their giant goat steeds to master the harsh mountain slopes.
Are they goats that ride goat steeds?
They're knights that ride goat steeds.
The knights are people, or are they goats?
The knights are people. They're humanoids.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Humanoid goats?
No, I think they're dwarves.
Okay.
And they ride giant goats that have, specific stats.
They can climb on mountains that are steep, right? Like
And
those goats on.
Goats can, yeah. Does that creature sound to you like old school D&D, or is that from a streaming partnership?
Well, goats also are really good at like eating vegetation and stuff. So it's kind of like the cube again, like nice vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, I think these are actually a nicer vacuum cleaner because these goats can like understand language. They are celestial. Much better vacuum cleaners than a cube that will dissolve you.
I have no idea. Should I take a wild guess?
Please take a wild guess.
Should I roll? I'm going to roll a D6.
That's not even a wild guess. Now you're just rolling dice. If you want to.
I want to roll dice.
Roll some dice. You ever rolled dice in the show in an hour?
It's a 1.
What does that mean? We should have decided that before you rolled the die.
Critical success? Fail. I'm going to say that this is something that somebody made up. That's not TTRPG. That's word salad. What am I saying? I got a 1
this
on
is absolutely.
I got a.
You got a not one for real. So just to be clear, all these creatures someone made up, and they're all TTRPG. So
Okay. I'm going to say that this is like an actual play creation.
it is. This is from the Tal'Dorei campaign setting from Critical Role.
Ooh.
We'll go through a couple more. The Gibbering Mouther.
Oh my gosh. Gibbering Mouther.
Of all the terrors created by foul sorcery, gibbering mouthers are among the most wicked and depraved. This creature is the composite eyes, mouths, and liquefied matter of its former victims. Tormented by the destruction of their bodies and absorption into the mouther, these victims gibber incoherently and are forced to consume everything in reach. Is that old school D&D? Is that actual play? Where's that from?
I have many mouths and I am always screaming.
Absolutely that.
I'm going to say that's from an actual play as well.
This is also from old school D&D.
Oh my goodness.
They really have a lot of these monsters that work well in dungeons.
That's a hint, isn't it?
Yeah. Where, the party is just kind of delving around, not meeting any NPCs and not getting a lot of world building.
Okay, just killing everything everything they see. Killing everything they see, and everything they see is trying to kill them pretty much.
I'll show you the Gibbering Mouther. This is not like a character that Matt Mercer could... Well, probably Matt Mercer could. This is not a character designed to have the DM imbue them with a deep and meaningful backstory.
No, it's got a lot of teeth.
It's got a lot of teeth. And
it looks like a lot of eyes.
It's a lot of dissolved flesh overall.
Okay, yeah, that's horrifying. That does seem like a short story monster, which I'm sure they were reading all those sci-fi.
Oh, they absolutely were. Yeah. Absolutely.
The joke I was making was referencing I have no mouth and I must scream.
I definitely know my science fiction short stories.
Okay, sweet.
Yes.
Welcome to Jake Knows the Science Fiction Short Stories that Riley's referencing corner.
Way more than the movies. I'll read one more. This is the Pale Man. Friedrich von Lichten ambitiously explored the mutagenic effects of delirium after Drakenheim's destruction, and was among the first to fully describe the effects of eldritch contamination upon the human body. He was ejected from the Amethyst Academy when it was discovered he was using apprentices as test subjects. So grave was his trespass that the Academy notified the Silver Order of his existence, putting a death bounty on his head. The Silver Order and the Amethyst Academy have been searching for him since.
That sounds like an actual play.
That is absolutely an actual play. That is from the Dungeon Dudes partnership book, Dungeons of Drakenheim.
Fun.
Yeah. And we're going to do, and you can kind of tell from this tier of backstory, we're going to talk about one more, the Lycanthropical. A Lycanthropical, let's read this part. A Lycanthropical can either resist its curse or embrace it. By resisting the curse, a Lycanthropical retains its normal alignment and personality while in humanoid form. It lives its boring life as it always has, burying deep its raging, murderous urges, just like the rest of us. Some individuals see little point in fighting the curse and accept what they are. They can assume pickle form or hybrid form at will. Most lycanthropickles that embrace their briny natures succumb to bloodlust, becoming evil, opportunistic creatures that prey on the weak. Is that old school D&D? Streaming, or where's that from?
That is definitely not old school D&D. I feel like pickle humor is much more of a mid 2000, not like between 2016 and now 14 type thing. Sounds like a Rick and Morty reference.
Riley, it is a Rick and Morty reference.
Pickle Rick.
It is a Pickle Rick reference from the official collaboration between Rick and Morty and Wizards of the Coast.
Boom.
It is not a supplement that I would recommend paying for.
I won't pay for it.
Sounds good. But yeah, this last decade is really like, it has been the era of the greatest growth and expansion of TTRPGs and like D&D above all else. And a huge part of that has been this explosion in actual play shows, including these like big budget professional productions. They're very fun to watch. I'm an enthusiastic consumer of them. But they do represent like another point of this like professionalization, you know, and this like a hobby becoming something that people do for a living that we've seen all season with TTRPGs.
I love Dimension 20.
Same here. That's all for this week.
I'm Production Master Riley.
And I'm Dungeon Inspector Jake.
If you're enjoying the show, subscribe and leave a review.
It helps other people find the show.
And will ward your favorite TTRPG publisher from purchase by a private equity firm.
For more on the show, including links to all our social media, visit foldedfrequencies.com/campaign spotlight.